Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Binge Battle. I am your host, Mark Ellis. This is the show where we have two incredible panelists, and they're going to be debating all things about one specific topic in the world of entertainment. So why not tackle Stranger Things? We just had the second half of season 4 drop, so there will be heavy spoilers for all 4 seasons, possibly, of Stranger Things during this episode. So if you've not yet checked out any of season 4, you may want to hit pause on this, go check that out, and come on back when you're as prepared as our two panelists here today. 5 rounds possible, 4 rounds definite. In each round, they're going to be debating a bunch of things that we saw, that we seen, that we heard, that we loved, or maybe hated in season 4 of Stranger Things. And so without further ado, your panelists today. Your first one, a dear friend of mine. Well, they're both dear friends of mine until the NBA playoffs. And then we have a fervent text thread that I cannot repeat on this show because it's a family program. He is part of the First Cut YouTube channel. You can catch a bunch of movie reviews, some podcasting occasionally, and he happens to be a world-class director whose short film Timestamp has made the festival rounds and has won some awards already. He's Robert Butler III. Hello, Robert. Welcome back to Binge Battle. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
So let me ask you this. Stranger Things dropped back in the old days, back in season 1. Were you like aware of Stranger Things coming out? Were you like, oh, what is this thing? Did you just kind of catch the social media wave like everybody else and binge it right away? Did you take your time? What was your entry point into Stranger Things way back when?
I definitely remember seeing the trailer pop off when it first came out back in 2016. And I remember watching it pretty immediately. I didn't necessarily love the first season as much as everybody else because I'm not the biggest fan of, like, you know, some of the 80s nostalgia kind of wave, you know, that was kind of been going on during that time period. But needless to say, I fell in love with the characters. I fell in love with the story. And right now I'm a huge Stranger Things fan, you know.
Look at that. Yeah, well, look, sometimes you have to have lived through the 80s to want to remember it. So your combatant today is a dear friend of yours and mine as well. You can also catch him doing reviews and a bunch of other great things with The First Cut. He is the one, the only, call him Ace because he wins a lot of Schmodown matches in years past, Andres Cabrera. Welcome back to the show. Andres, what's going on, bud?
What is up, man? How you doing?
I mean, this is just like us hanging out again, except we're not watching your Phoenix Suns, who made the playoffs, or Robert's LA Lakers, who, checks notes, did not make the playoffs. And so it's not going to be quite as heated as that, but it's still going to be fun talking Stranger Things. Your introduction to Stranger Things, Andres, do you remember loving it, or do you remember kind of warming up to it like Robert did?
Oh, I loved it right off the bat. And I also remember watching it right when it dropped. It was definitely reaching a lot of hype, and I jumped right on the train, and sure enough, it delivered. And it's definitely the staple Netflix show now, which is amazing.
It really is. And we might talk about the future of Stranger Things if we have time at the end of this show, but that is in the future. Right here and now, we're about to kick off Binge Battle with our first round. Keep in mind, each round, you competitors get up to a minute for your opening statement. You get up to 30 seconds for your rebuttal. And then I'll set y'all up for a closing statement, which is your mic drop moment, putting a cap on the round and your argument. At the end of that, I will have to choose between 2 dear allies of mine and give them a point. Whoever has the most points at the end of the match wins. We could go to sudden death, possibly. We're not there yet. Where we are is topic number 1 in round number 1. And it's all about the season 4 conclusion. We're finally there. We made it through 2, I guess, segments of season 4. It is now finito. So was it good? Was it bad? Was it okay? Where did it stand for you? Andres Cabrera kicking us off here. 1 minute on the clock.
I thought season 4 was really good. I thought the conclusion wrapped up really well. I thought the length of it, at first, it seemed overwhelming, but it all came together. The pacing, I feel like, is what the Duffer Brothers are really good at. They know how to pace stories, how to pace characters. And I feel like that pacing allows them to tell a story, a complete story with each character having their own moment, their own character time to breathe and to allow themselves to have this time between themselves before they face this giant upside down battle between them and Vecna. So I felt like the conclusion was good. Obviously, it always can be better, but man, it really is satisfying to see the leveling up of this season with the production budget, with the music, and with everything that came with it. So I thought season 4 was good, man.
The pacing was on point, and that budget certainly showed up on screen. Over to you, Robert Butler III. How do you feel about season 4, its conclusion?
Well, first of all, talking about season 4 in general, I loved season 4. I thought this was one of the best seasons of Stranger Things in general. I love the new characters that we got introduced to. Argyle, a pineapple on pizza fan. Eddie is one of my new favorite characters. RIP. We got to see Lucas, getting on the basketball court and hooping. So it's a whole lot of surprises that I didn't anticipate seeing this season that really, really surprised me. That being said, though, I do think the last episode, the finale of season 4, was a little bit underwhelming. I thought it was just okay. And the reason I think it's just okay is because what we've been building up to this entire season has been seeing 11 cooking in the lab with Dr. Brenner and like really trying to develop her powers and hit that full maximum power set. And I felt like when we finally hit the finale, we didn't get that maximum superpower like 11 that I was kind of looking forward to seeing the most. Like she should have been like some Wanda, from like WandaVision or something like that. Or she should have really been like taken it to the next level. And she did piggyback to off of Max's mind to, fight Vecna, which was really, really cool and was a pretty big power upgrade. But, as we're going to talk about later, I thought she had an even bigger, more cooler moment in the previous episode 8, when she had escaped from the compound and like blew everything up. So that being said, like I really enjoyed season 4, but the season 4 conclusion, it was a little longer than it needed to be, and it didn't give me exactly what I wanted for the power set for 11.
Two great ways to open an argument there. And it took Robert all of, I believe, 7 seconds to reference pineapple on pizza. So another hot debate amongst our friendship. Let's go back to you, Andres, because Robert feels like maybe some meat left on the bone there, wanting to realize more of 11's full potential. Your rebuttal.
Yeah, I feel like that's a big point. I feel like that's very purposeful from the Duffer Brothers. They wanted to have kind of a moment where even Mike says it at the end of the episode, where he says 11's never lost before, and this is kind of a moment where she does lose. And I feel like that's going to come back in season 5 when eventually she does come into her own powers. She does level up to the way that Brenner or Papa predicted that she could be, to a point where Vecna is so completely overpowered that even the upside down is probably going to bend to 11's will. So I think we're going to see huge power up with 11 in season 5. And it's kind of crazy how Nancy was kind of the big hero and the big star defeating Vecna more than even 11 was. And I feel like that's very much done on purpose. So I kind of like that. I like that there's different characters kind of stepping up, and it's not just Goku winning over and over again. Shout out to Dragon Ball Z, but it's always kind of annoying when the main character just is the only one that wins the fight, and it's not any of the side characters that we also enjoy that can also win a fight. So I think that's a cool thing that Stranger Things brought into this finale.
And Goku has entered the chat. Back to you, Robert Butler III. It seems like the crux of each of y'all's arguments is how you felt about 11. So continue, Mr. Butler.
When we talk about how 11, she did have moments. She never had a moment of losing, and this was kind of a moment of like a bit of a failure, but I felt like the show wanted to like have his cake and eat it too a little bit, because I felt like we had that big epic finale where the city's kind of splitting into pieces and things are kind of like really looking dour. That might have been a much stronger moment to end the episode on than giving us another 45 minutes of all the characters meeting each other again, like wrapping up. I think what was so unique about this season is that all of the characters had their separate adventures all in like different locations, but they still found a way to like be together somehow. But then at the end of the season, we still had another like 30-40 minutes of everybody like, oh hey, good to see you again, oh hey, like how you doing? I didn't love that much. That could have been, I don't need the 2.5-hour version. Give me the 2-hour cut and give me the Empire Strikes Back, the real deep and dark ending to it too.
All right, so back to Andres Cabrera for your final statement here in a heated round 1.
Yeah, I feel like them coming together was almost kind of needed for the audience. I think the audience needs to see that these characters are going to team up and are going to unite for the final battle for season 5. And we still do kind of get an Empire Strikes Back final shot with them looking over Hawkins and seeing Hawkins with the gateway to the upside down kind of split in half and kind of prepping for that final battle between them and Vecna. And obviously we see the Will spine tingling moment as well, which also kind of shows you that, oh, okay, the real battle is still ahead of you. So I still feel like that is still there, but adding a little bit of, now we know that 11 for sure knows that Hopper is alive. Now that we know that these characters are coming back together, now we know where Max is at currently in the storyline as well. I feel like all those moments were kind of needed. And if we left those questions up in the air, it would have been a little bit too tedious for them to wait 2 years or 3 years for season 5 and not know what's going on with those characters.
All right, Robert Butler III. I'm still making my decision. You have the final statement in round 1.
Yeah, and I definitely agree that having those characters reintroduced to each other and get back in line is definitely an asset. There's so much in this season. We've seen so many long episodes, so many different storylines, so many locations that at a certain point it's like, it's where can we make the cuts, right? I feel like they sacrificed a lot of 11's super amazing, powerful moments that she could have potentially had for less satisfying, I guess from a character perspective, satisfying, but from an audience perspective, not as many satisfying like kind of re-companion moments that we got at the end of the episode.
All right. So that is it for round number 1. And, I try to take my own opinion out of this because I really did enjoy what Stranger Things did throughout season 4. The conclusion itself, I did feel was a little long in the tooth. And I feel like some of the reunions were like, okay, let's get this thing going a little bit. But I do feel like it was necessary to serve the audience, as Andres had said, and we are still setting stuff up, but we don't know when we're getting season 5 just yet. And so I do think that the audience kind of needed those reunion moments, and y'all weren't alive back then, but the 80s, that's what it was all about, baby, was reunions. And so I'm going to give a point to Andres Cabrera by the thinnest of margins. I promise it had nothing to do with the pineapple on pizza reference, Robert. I'm taking my own feelings on pie out of this. So Andres goes up 1-0, but now we go to round number 2, and we're going to celebrate the greatness that we got, the things that we loved in season 4. And we're going to start with you, Robert Butler III. What was the best season 4 moment in your opinion?
Well, it was a moment I kind of alluded to a minute ago. The moment when 11 escapes the compound, she finally gets out. And it's a moment where Papa, Dr. Brenner, actually kind of helps her escape because the military invades the entire laboratory and is taking everybody out left and right. 11's getting chased by helicopters, mad vehicles, mad gunfire all around the place. And we see her this whole time, like, struggling throughout the whole season with her powers. Like, she had it through sporadic moments here or there, but this was the first time we actually got that full unlocked power set through and through. And she managed to take control of the entire helicopter on some like Darth Vader, Obi-Wan joint, took it down and literally just threw it to the ground, exploded all the vehicles and the whole entrance to the compound. And it felt like the most epic, true action movie, sci-fi movie moment of all time. If like those classic action movies where the characters looking at the explosion. And that's also what I enjoyed about it. And the season in a show that has a lot of sci-fi elements and a lot of digital visual effects, you can very much tell this was like a practical explosion shot in a very isolated desert. It kind of gave like very Matrix vibes to it as well. So I really, really dug this moment. To me, this was like the epic triumphant, and like we've been joking about, it's the character who's been in the compound, been training the entire season, finally getting out and making that splash. You can't beat that.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of Rey in the desert in The Rise of Skywalker, just really taking control of a ship and just like, whoa, what are we in for here? Let's go over to Andres Cabrera for your best moment of season 4.
Yeah, I think it's the moment that everyone was talking about back in volume 1, the one that took over TikTok, took over the internet. It really is. And the reason why is because it's a really incredible moment. And that's the running up that hill, Max escaping the upside down from Vecna moment, where we see a character of Vecna being introduced all the way in episode 1, attacking Chrissy, taking over her mind, demeaning her to the point of reaching death in the most horrific manner. So we know the stakes that are set up in pretty much the entire season 4, episode 4 with Max. So we're so afraid that Max is not only going to die, but die in the most horrific manner possible. And she's going to die with trauma that is placed in her head that she herself is holding on to. There's so much heart inside that episode, and there's so much heart inside that moment where the music plays and she chooses her favorite song, which is Running Up That Hill, and has this emotional context of remembering her friends, her heart, her family, and realizing that she is worth it and her life is worth moving forward to. And she does want to escape, and her escaping is her own fight to really break out of the upside down. And I feel like that moment encompasses what Stranger Things is all about, which is about friendship. It's about being yourself. It's about pushing past your own trauma and your own fear. And it's incredible because it combines all those things inside one episode and one moment.
Yeah, it reminded me of a great 80s running back, Walter Payton, how he used to train in the offseason just running up a hill all day. Let's go back to Robert Butler III here for your rebuttal. We got two really good arguments y'all picked.
You know, I definitely can't deny the running up the hill moment as being one of the most iconic moments of the show, period. I mean, Andres is right. That song's been trending on TikTok nonstop. I definitely think that for one, I think it's a great moment that's visually beautiful. I also think it gets slightly undercut later on in the season because we end up going back to Max getting controlled by Vecna again and actually dying. We think she's dying or she died for a minute or something like that. So we ended up having that whole beautiful scene and beautiful moment, not for nothing, but ultimately just to establish like plot elements. Meanwhile, this moment for 11 is her penultimate climactic moment as her as a character, because you got to remember, her and Papa's relationship has been antagonistic since season 1. Dr. Brenner was in the show since season 1. He was the doctor who was controlling her, manipulating her. And, we think he gets eaten by this demigorgon, but he ends up coming back and surprising her and surprising the audience with his return in this season. So, he comes in, he's manipulating 11. He's controlling her. He's literally, he still has that brace around 11. So she doesn't even have full access to her powers. But even still with that, in the face of the moment, in the heat of the moment, she still gets enough control, enough power to make this giant epic explosion. And we get this also really beautiful subtle moment between Dr. Brenner and 11 too, where she says goodbye to Papa, but Papa says, "Oh, I love you," but she's definitely not going to say it back because he's like the abusive dad that she's had the entire time. So there's a lot of layers to this moment that I really, really enjoyed.
There's a whole lot of emotional content in that one sequence. Back to you, Andres.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of that moment and a lot of that scene is based on how much you buy into the Papa and 11 relationship. And I, for one, cannot stand Dr. Brenner, cannot stand Papa. And I really do feel like if there's any character who's probably one of the most annoying, I know a lot of people said Jason, but my God, give me Jason over Brenner. I think Brenner is the most annoying character in the show. And I feel like a lot of that emotional context was already dealt with in season 1 and season 2, where she moved past Dr. Brenner, meeting the other numbers and meeting the other characters and really talking through her emotions as far as what her emotional weight from Papa was, especially with Hopper too, because Hopper helped her move past that as well. So I feel like that a lot of that for me was so tedious to the point that the moment where she pulls down the helicopter is more of a cool shot than a cool moment. I feel like the moment is really something where you embody and you encompass a lot inside one scene. And that's exactly what Max does for running up that hill inside the Upside Down, where she encompasses her past trauma, her past relationships, and her past friendships, and tries to move forward, especially being someone who's a young girl and who's facing almost these thoughts of suicide and these thoughts of regretting her own life and regretting her own thoughts. So I feel like moving past that and fighting that and seeing an actual battling your actual demons while facing down a demon is really kind of the unique factor of what Stranger Things can deliver, where they're literally giving you the embodiment of your fears and your trauma inside Vecna and inside the Upside Down, and breaking free from that is just a true example of what the Duffer Brothers can do with a show like Stranger Things. So I feel like that moment just embodies everything from Stranger Things.
I like that a lot. Facing your inner demons while facing a literal demon.
Yeah.
It's a full day's work that Max has put it in here. We're gonna go back to Robert Butler III. You have the first opening and closing statement here in round 2.
They have to deal with their trauma and fight the trauma the same way that the It Clown made the kids deal with that and this too. And even though this is definitely a better version of It Chapter, I didn't like It Chapter 2. So I definitely think this is a better version of like haunting kids based on their mental illness and things of that nature. But that being said though, it's not like we haven't seen this already. But with 11, we haven't seen her we've seen her come out of her shell and we've seen her get established, but throughout the season, we've seen her get her kicked through and through all the way down from the beginning of the season, from her getting bullied when we're watching those flashbacks, being trained with the other other numbers and all of that nature. So we see a whole lifetime of trauma that she's also dealing with and that she's also going. And with Max, we've seen her deal with problems and trauma before in the past, but a lot of that stuff kind of really came at the beginning of this season and felt more of like a device to get Vecna to haunt her. And again, that's something that we've seen already before, but we haven't seen 11 have like this full like breakdown, full rock bottom moment that she had at the beginning of the season, and then ultimately rise above that and conquer her trauma, conquer her past, and conquer her relationships with Dr. Brenner. And by the way, you said you didn't like Dr. Brenner. You hated him. That's also why I love this moment, because we see him die. He's dead after this, so he's dead. So yeah, if anything, you should be loving this moment too.
I mean, did that sway you at all, Andres? Now it's your final statement.
No, because I feel like he should have been dead a long time ago. I mean, I just feel like the character was dragged out for so long. Every episode that he was in, every monologue that he made, I just felt like, man, they're really milking the crap out of this actor, which, I mean, he's a great actor, but I felt like the character itself has really worn out his stay back in season 1 or season 2, where he should have been eliminated already. And I feel like those moments for 11 moving on in the beginning of season 4, part 1, with her being bullied, I thought those moments were more interesting and was more of an uphill battle than even Dr. Brenner was, because it felt like a more social aspect to 11's life. And how does she move on from being a lab rat essentially her entire life? So I feel like that moment is disconnected even from the Brenner moment, where it presents a different challenge, where the Brenner challenge is just kind of going back and retrospecting towards the previous seasons and towards previous episodes. Whereas I feel like the Max one is her growing as a character and her moving on as a character and her really establishing herself as one of the greatest characters inside Stranger Things. Unlike before, because before Max wasn't really a huge part of the crew and she didn't really have a huge moment. And now she has one of the biggest moments in all of Stranger Things that really embodies a lot of what a lot of teens actually feel like. They feel a lot of, past regret and past trauma. So I feel like her moving on really just encompasses and embodies a lot of what the audience feels, and her breaking through that through music, which is something that's even more incredible because everyone can relate to their favorite song or their favorite soundtrack, can really feel and can really relate to that moment.
With Max, it was nice to see a character get their full shine like that in that moment. But yeah, you could say the same for 11 as well, because like teenagers go through some stuff. We've all been there, y'all a little more recently than me, but you go through stuff, and it is about battling and it's about overcoming. And so I think that any teenager could look at either one of these characters that we're sort of highlighting here as to say, okay, they got through that, I can get through whatever I'm going through. But we've been with 11 since really the start of the show, and to see that moment, not just the cool physical allure of an action sequence, but also to have the emotional sort of to see her sort of matriculate away from Papa, I thought was a very important moment for the show. I'm with Andres, where at the beginning of the season I was like, why are we dealing with Dr. Brenner again? Haven't we gotten past this? But I think that what we saw in season 4 leading up to that moment warranted the return of Matthew Modine. So homework for both of y'all: go see Vision Quest and Memphis Belle, because Matthew Modine's great in them. And then I'm giving the point to Robert Butler III for the 11 moment. And so here we go. It is 1-1, and y'all really did some work getting ready for this binge battle. This is a good one. These are some of the best arguments I've ever heard on the show in regards to anything, folks. So let's keep it cooking here as we go to round number 3 now. And it's simple. Best character. Starting with you, Andres Cabrera.
Best character is the character I just named. I feel like the character that really took over the season, and the character that shined more than any other character and that had the most to do, like truly had the most to do, was Max. And I feel like Max grew as a character, became beloved as a character, had incredible moments as a character, and just really showed who she is in the group and who she can be, and not just kind of fade in the background like other side characters have in the past, but really be one of the emotional hearts of the entire show and one of the most emotional beats of the entire show, because she's placed in a position that's unlike the other characters. She doesn't come from the same middle class background as the other kids. She comes from a poor class background. She lives in a trailer park and she deals with certain issues and certain stuff that the other kids don't deal with when it comes to family matters and when it comes to family situations. She comes from a broken home. She comes from a broken background, and she's dealing with this trauma with her brother, who she doesn't know how to feel about because she has these conflicted feelings. So I feel like Max truly coming to who she is and to who she always was inside Stranger Things is what makes her the best character of the season.
All right. And yeah, setting laying the groundwork for your argument in a previous round. We saw RB3 do that in the first round, kind of hinting at what he was going to talk about in the second round. So there's a lot of strategy going on here in Binge Battle this episode too. Back to you, Robert Butler III. I will Venmo you $20 if you pick Dr. Brenner just to mess with Andres.
Don't do it.
I won't be Dr. Brenner. I won't have no legs to stand on because I don't really like that dude either. But I definitely gotta shout out my man Eddie. You know, Eddie is one of those characters. Stranger Things does a thing where they introduce a new character every season, multiple new characters every season, and some live, some die. Unfortunately, Eddie didn't make it all the way through, RIP, but he died fighting for a city that hated him all the way through, hated him. And this is all because he was a freak. It was outside of the norm, outside of the coloring lines a little bit. He, obviously he got held back a little bit in the beginning. He had that like monologue where he's like, oh, I've been in high school for this many years. He was kind of ambiguous about it. And, but he said this was finally going to be his year. And we see him have that full hero arc from beginning to end. In the beginning, he doesn't have that many friends. Like he has the Hellfire Club, but they're kind of like outskirts or whatever. Even as the storyline continues going on, they kind of end up fading away, and we end up getting him having just the most honest, true camaraderie with Dustin, which is, another beloved character in the series. So ultimately, when Eddie ends up dying at the end, it's just one of the most heart-wrenching moments, especially for somebody like from Dustin's point of view, because that was really a role model he could look up to. And Eddie's not the most ideal role model, but he is definitely a good person, because when Christy came to him to ask him to buy drugs, he actually gave Christy good advice. He genuinely cared for the rest of the people, and he was a legit metal rock and roller. Like when they had that moment when they were playing the guitar on top of the trailer to attract the bats, that was amazing. So Eddie's my favorite character of the season.
Yeah, that was a contender for me for best season 4 moments right there. Two sort of outcasts that met their fate in the show. So y'all are getting our listeners and our viewers emotional here. Back to you, Andres, for your rebuttal, stumping for Max.
Yeah, I like that we chose the two characters that had the exact same death moment in the show. But yeah, I love Eddie. I think he definitely had plenty to do this season when it comes to a new character. But at the end of the day, it is a new character, and it is limited episodes that we got with Eddie versus someone like Max, who we've built up since season 2. We've known Max for a while now, and her having this arc where she continues to grow and she continues to be a beloved character, to me was even more effective. And her having that moment in episode 4 with running up that hill, and her having that moment in episode 4 with confronting Vecna, fighting Vecna, and listening to the music to break free is a moment that we really felt, because we felt like we were part of what Max has already been through, and we know what she's been through because we've seen it. Versus Eddie, we kind of get hints as his background, we kind of get hints as far as where he comes from, but we don't really know too much. We just kind of see his actions and we appreciate him. But at the end of the day, we know Max, and we appreciate Max much more because we know exactly what she's been through, because we've seen it all throughout the entire show of Stranger Things since season 2. So I feel like Max has a little bit more meat on the bone when it comes to a character-wise. And that's why her moments in season 4, to me, were far more impactful.
A little more of a groundwork laid there, a foundation set in previous seasons. But Robert, as you mentioned, Eddie came in and went out with a bang too. So I'll give you your rebuttal now, good sir.
I can't argue that Max has been around longer. She's definitely a key character, and she had, like we both said, she had an amazing moment with the running up the hill scene and just everything she'd been through this season. She had a lot of stuff going on. But that being said, though, with Eddie, he was actively being hunted by the entire town over a D&D, right? Over Dungeons and Dragons, which sounds crazy now, but for a lot of people and a lot of households and a lot of communities, frankly, fantasy, card games and stuff like that is just outright criminalized. He was demonized just for being himself and just for being who he was. And I think, to me, that's what makes me relate to Eddie a little bit more, because I personally, I when I grew up, I wasn't allowed to watch like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, because it was seen as like not like appropriate. So I could definitely see from the perspective of, he's somebody who's been running his entire life. He's been, he's running from the basketball team people Jason, who are chasing him and literally about to hunt him and trying to kill him. He's running from, Vecna and all of these other things. He's running from his own past and trauma. But at the end, he finally stops running and takes control of his own life and has that heroic moment, that heroic ending moment. Whereas Max, when she goes out, I felt like, dang, man, she went out of something that was, like we knew how to fight Vecna already, and she fought Vecna already, and she still couldn't defeat, it wasn't her fault, but still, it's like, we already had that face off of Vecna, and she loses the second time. It's like, it's kind of a weak way to take an amazing character out. Eddie had an amazing intro and outro within this season. So that's why I'm giving him the season 4 prize.
So Eddie maybe went out with a bigger bang, you would say, than Max, but it seems like both characters have won y'all's hearts. And even though you have to argue for one or the other, it's like, no, you're making some good points here too. I like what's happening right now. Back to you, Andres, for your final statement and possibly the most competitive round thus far.
When it comes to Max, a lot of people kind of forget where she's coming from, where her relationship with Billy, kind of looking back in season 2 and season 3, her speech talking about how she felt about Billy and her conflicted feelings to Vecna, talking about how she wasn't sure if he deserved to live, was a very compelling moment and a compelling speech. And it shows you that her heart is in a place where her broken home and her trauma, not just from her life, but from Billy himself, and seeing Billy die and seeing Billy go out as a hero, she wasn't sure how to feel about it. And I feel like that's such a relatable moment as well. Besides her broken home aspect, besides her class aspect, besides everything else she's been through, I feel like that's a huge factor as far as who Max is. And then her looking towards the future and her trying to place her feet on the ground and not just rely on her past trauma, and realize what's in front of her with Lucas. And her relationship with Lucas, to me, is the best part of the entire show. It might be the best relationship in the entire show. And it's between two of the younger kids, maybe even more than Mike and Eleven, who people have kind of softened on or soured on, because I feel like when it comes to Max and Lucas, that relationship really sold you on what is the potential of what Max can bring, versus when it comes to Eddie, I feel like his potential was lived throughout those few episodes where his arc was complete, whereas Max, her arc feel like it was just getting started. It was just cooking. And you just felt so connected to her that you just want to see more of Max as much as you can, because you want her to grow with Lucas as long as she can live. Versus Eddie, you kind of know and you kind of expect exactly what the Stranger Things writers are doing when they introduce a character like him, and you kind of see his death coming. Versus Max, you just feel like you want to spend more time with her and you want her to have that long life with Lucas.
So a little more unprepared for Max's fate than we were Eddie's. Robert Butler III, you have the final statement.
Eddie would have easily been either in jail or dead if it wasn't for something like the Hellfire Club, right? If it wasn't for the community that he built amongst the people who he built it with. And he was, even though he wasn't the most exuberant leader in the world and he didn't have the most academic credentials, he was a leader amongst his people and he was a role model to Dustin. Seeing that relationship that Eddie and Dustin had built up throughout this season, and seeing that, as you said, Andres, that complete arc that we saw from Eddie, to me, that's what makes him a more fulfilling character to me, because we saw somebody who had potential, who had hope for the first time in his life, actually has some potential going forward and like a upstarting chance. And he ended up having that cut short, but in the most epic way possible, ended up going out and while protecting, like I said, a town that was actively fighting against him, actively going against him. And even after his death, they were still talking negatively about him. And, even his uncle had to come to the thing and was, didn't even have any details about how he died. So it's all traumatic all around for Eddie. It's traumatic for Max too, but that's why I just personally vibe with Eddie's storyline in this season.
Yeah, representing Hawkins a lot better than Hawkins represented Eddie. And so when we look at these two characters, I don't know what it is. I can't stand watching teenagers, kids at school get bullied on TV program. It gets inside my soul somehow. I didn't like it with 11, didn't like it with Eddie, don't like it with anyone. But when we look at these two characters, I do think that Max had the leg up going into season 4 because we did have a relationship already that we had built up. And so I think it really is neck and neck as far as who had the more interesting season, who had the more uphill literal and figurative battle to fight here. But when we talk about them meeting their fate, their demise, it happened to both Eddie and Max, but I side slightly more with Andres, where it was just so unexpected with Max. And I think that retroactively that made me care more about that character. And Robert knows better than most how hard it is for me to vote against a guitar player named Eddie, but I am going to go with Max with Andres. And so Andres gets the point here in round number 3, and it is 2-1 as we head into round number 4. And that is simply going to be titled, What is the Most Shocking Moment? And we're going to start back with Robert Butler III.
To me, the most shocking moment easily came in episode 4 at the Briar's house when Will, Jonathan, and Mike are just all chilling. They just ordered some pizza from their boy Argyle. They think it's on the way. And the FBI agent opens the door. They get a knock, opens the door. Boom, gets capped right there. And out of nowhere, we get the most massive, amazingly beautiful shot, one take, long take, shootout sequence that happens right in the middle of the episode. And it's mind-blowing. Like, we see Agent Hansen, who out of nowhere, like, I didn't think this chubby, parabolic can do was gonna have it in him, but he ends up just like slanging. Like he just ends up like defending almost the entire, takes out almost an entire unit of military people by himself. So I thought that was really, really dope. It was just so shocking because it literally came out of nowhere. Like, there was an emotional scene with the Briars that led up to that, and then there were emotional scenes like that were in the middle of that episode that were leading up to that too. But there was no indication that there was going to be a shootout like this. There was no indication that there would be things. And they obviously hinted towards the conflict between the military and the researchers and the science people who are trying to help 11 and things of that nature. And that's a very classic sci-fi concept and trope that, could date back all the way back to like the 1950s. But this was the way they like blew it up literally to like this all-out shootout was just amazing to me. I thought it was really, really cool. And then when Argyle actually pulls up and then he sees, and then they have to like jump into his car and he's like, hey, what's up, guys? Why is there somebody carrying a gun? And they're like, drive. Like, what's wrong with you? So I loved everything about that scene.
Yeah, and they tricked us into that whole sequence with what every kid loves the most is pizza delivery. Every kid, or me, last night. Andres Cabrera, over to you for your most shocking moment in Stranger Things.
Yeah, I feel like my most shocking moment comes in the finale, and that's when Max gets crushed and she gets killed by Vecna, and we see her obviously lose her life in front of Lucas. I feel like that moment kind of shocked everyone because we all expect someone like an Eddie, someone like a Jason, someone like a Brenner to die because we know those kind of characters are kind of finding their way out of the shell. But when it comes to someone like Max, we've known her from season 2, so seeing her not just die, but die in one of the most brutal ways we've ever seen in the show, to me was one of the most shocking moments, and it completely broke me. And I think it broke a lot of people watching that scene, because when we see deaths in the past, we've seen deaths when it comes to characters that tend to skew a tiny bit older, whether it comes to Sean Astin's character, whether it comes to Alexi's character, or even Eddie, who's an older teenager. But when it comes to Max, someone who's so young and whose face, Sadie Sink's face, still looks so young compared to some of the other kids who already look older, but Sadie still looks like a little girl. Seeing her die in that horrific manner, and Lucas crying over her, and us buying into that relationship and buying into that character so much, especially after season 4 and running up that hill and her escaping from the Upside Down, to me was by far the most shocking moment.
I'll pick 2 good ones again here. Back to you, Robert Butler III, for your rebuttal.
I don't know if I would consider the Max scene the most shocking because they set up the entire finale for her to have that confrontation with Vecna. So we knew she was going to have that confrontation with Vecna either way. It's going to go one or two ways. She's going to live or she's going to die, right? So like, it's like, it's shocking how I guess it might have happened. But also the thing too, I don't know if she actually dies or not. I mean, she clearly goes blind. She clearly like loses a bunch of limbs, and she clearly like goes into a coma. And they say she dies for like a minute, but there's no reason why they would like keep her body in the hospital and keep her like living for that long if they weren't planning on bringing her back next season. So like all that being said, it kind of like to me undercuts that moment a little bit. And it just doesn't like resonate as much for me. But I will not, there's no exaggerating when I tell you I was laughing so hard when that shootout scene started, because I was just I was just literally like playing like a water game, like a phone game on my phone or something like that. And out of nowhere, you just hear like AR-15s going out of nowhere, and you're like, yo, what is this? Like, how did this happen? Like, you just think there's mad kids talking. So it was shocking in the sense of it literally came out of nowhere. It literally like woke you up, shocked you, and in the context, you know, it's one of those beautiful like Tarantino scenes, right, where something big happens and they explain it to you like after they explain everything that happens like afterwards. So when we get the explanation from Agent Hansen, like, yo, these are the people who are looking for 11, they're coming after you, and he ends up dying and giving that phone number to them and ends up setting them on a whole different path for a new adventure, those new characters. I thought it was really good. And I thought that was in a season where Mike, Will, and Jonathan were sidelined, that was definitely a highlight moment for those three.
You kids and your phones, put the phone away when you're watching Stranger Things, Robert. Let's go back to Andres Cabrera for your rebuttal.
Yeah, I almost feel like you undercut your argument by telling us you were on your phone. But at the same time, I just feel like when it comes to measuring a season, or when it comes to measuring a show, and you say to yourself, okay, what moment just really kind of shocked me, broke me, moved me, just completely took me out of my entire comfort zone and just pulled me out. And I feel like when it comes to a shootout, yeah, it's a cool moment. It's a cool kind of like, whoa, this is crazy, but it lasts like 3-4 minutes versus a moment with Max, with her dying, and you don't even know her fate until the very end of that action scene when they're trying to kill Vecna, when Hopper's trying to kill the Demogorgon, when 11 is fighting Vecna at the same time. Like, there's 4 different fights going on at the same time while Max is being killed. And I feel like that even adds stakes to it because you're so concerned about Max. So seeing her finally meet her fate at the very end of all that kind of breaks everything down. It kind of takes you out of your comfort zone, takes you out of your moment, and kind of shocks you to the core and makes you realize like, oh, damn, we were just having this heroic moment where Nancy Wheeler was just like wielding a shotgun and shooting Vecna in the face. And now we're crying our eyes out because we lost one of the greatest characters we've ever had in the show. And I agree that maybe she's not necessarily gone, but in that moment, we sure thought she was gone. And Lucas made us believe she was gone because he was crying like crazy and giving us the performance of his life. So I feel like that moment itself just carried everything in the entire season finale when it comes to the heart of the show, when it comes to the action, when it comes to like, oh, cool gunfight, like we can see that in other shows. But when it comes to Stranger Things, you want to see heart. And I think heart came from Max more than any other character, and her being crushed in that moment just crushed our hearts more than any other moment inside Stranger Things.
It was certainly, and I don't mean a pun intended, it was certainly a breaking point. It was very, very tough to watch. And so as far as the visceral, shocking moment, we now are at the final statement stage. To you first, Mr. Butler.
Well, I'm just going off of what you were saying, Andres. When that, and then like when Max was getting killed, there was a lot going on. There was Demogorgons being fought in Russia. There were, mad other conflicts going on at the same time. And that's, to me, is what really undercut the shockingness of it. It felt like just one part of a bigger action scene, one part of a bigger finale, which was already part of a plan. It was already part of the plan that she was going to have to go through that process. Now, what wasn't part of the plan was her getting either dead or crippled or whatever. But again, like if they're going to bring her back, that undercuts Caleb, who plays Lucas, amazing performance when we think she's dead. So it's like, what was the point of that anyway? And to me, that's why I chose the shootout scene, because it feels so much more isolated. It's not part of like a bigger action scene. It's not part of like a finale. It literally just happened in the middle of an episode, randomly, shockingly. And then it goes in, it goes out, and we still see the ramifications of it for those 3 characters throughout the rest of the season. So that to me is why I probably will say, when it comes to the most shocking moment, I would say I'll say that. And when it comes to like the most, heartbreaking, death or most heartbreaking moment, I would definitely go with Max. But when it comes to shocking, there's nothing more shocking than the shootout, especially at the Briar's house.
And it's a good point, because that shootout wasn't just an isolated thing. It did have legs that stretched well into future episodes. So, Andres Cabrera, you have the final statement here in round number 4.
Yeah, I almost feel like measuring that moment when it comes to the weight on the characters is kind of interesting, right? Because we meet that agent guy, and then we get that shootout, and then he dies. But I don't know if there's that many ripple waves when it comes to the characters, because obviously they bury him. They kind of do this kind of goofy scene with Argyle writing Mr. Agent on his grave and then finding the pen and all that. But I don't feel like there's actually any stakes that came from that, or any emotional stakes that came from that. I feel like when it comes to shocking moments, you have to have some sort of emotional stakes. And what's more of an emotional stakes than Lucas losing his mind over Max being potentially dead? Whether she's eventually dead or not is another question. But in that moment, we realize that she is dead. And I feel like Lucas realizing that, and us as an audience seeing Lucas's heartbreak, was more heartbreaking than any moment we've seen in the show, and was more shocking than any moment, because we don't expect someone like Max to die in that manner, versus seeing an agent get shot in a show. That's just par for the course when it comes to Stranger Things. But seeing Max get crushed by an evil, dark demon wizard, lab rat experiment, brother of 11 kind of character like Vecna is, that's something we don't expect, because we've seen her escape from the Upside Down. So we don't expect her to once again go back in the Upside Down and die in the same manner that we didn't want her to die all the way back in season 4. So seeing that as an audience, we were just like, no, 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 because that's exactly what we were trying to avoid back in episode 4. So seeing it eventually happen in the finale, to me, that's the most shocking in all of Stranger Things.
Both of these moments that y'all are talking about were at least surprising, I think, to everyone watching Stranger Things. And, Max is just one of those characters that you just intrinsically care about. And so that's going to up the shock value, but it's not just a shock. It's also just a hard thing to watch. It's a hard thing to process. But I'm going to bring up my favorite and possibly the greatest Star Wars movie of all time, Return of the Jedi. There's a scene towards the end, and Ewok gets capped, and oh my God, is it heartbreaking. But the thing that saves it is that immediately we cut back to a space battle, because as Robert pointed out, there's a bunch of other stuff going on during the point when Max is getting crushed. Whereas with just for a pure visceral shock moment, I do feel like Roberts had a little more just, oh my God, I can't believe that happened in the moment. And so I might be a little more emotional, a lot more emotional towards Max. But as far as just the pure shock value, I think it's the moment that made RB3 laugh the hardest. And if you've ever heard that laugh at a comedy club, it can power an entire town. So I'm going to give the point to Robert here, and that means that we are tied. We are also running short on time. So we're going to go to a sudden death round, but it's going to be lightning quick. Here's what I need from each of my competitors. You get no more than 30 seconds here, and the round is going to be decided by the question that is, what is the best season of Stranger Things? So you can pick any season you want that's already aired. We're going to start with Andres. Again, 30 seconds at most on the clock, because we got to go quick. What's the best season?
Best season is season 2. It's when the characters came into their own. It's when Steve Harrington became the hero that we all knew he could be. He became the most charming character in the show. 11 came into her own. She realized who she was. Dustin came into his own. He got his own confidence back. We introduced the character of Max in the show, who's become one of the most favorite characters of the entire show. Season 2 had the most complete arc of any season of Stranger Things.
You just nailed that presentation. I think that was exactly 30 seconds too. Well done, sir. You came prepared. Robert Butler, it's now sort of like a hill that you have to climb for your, I guess, rebuttal, but this is going to be also your final statement. What is the best season, in your opinion, of Stranger Things?
Well, I think the best season is honestly season 4, the season we just watched. I loved how it took kids emotionally serious when they confronting themes of bullying, mental health, grief, trauma. These are all things that a lot of kids actually deal with in the mental health field. So it was very empowering that they talked about those subjects. Also, David Harbour had a way more creative and suspenseful Russian prison escape scene here than he had in Black Widow. Just saying. Also, another amazing moment: Robin taking a stance to the dean's office, taking a stand, speaking on gender equality in higher education. And of course, as Andres said, everything with Max in this season was amazing, including the usage of the Kate Bush iconic song. How much clearance they had to get for that in order to use that. Apparently, they had to super convince her. And the budget was super dope too. It was the biggest spectacle of TV I've ever seen. So.
Wow. All right. So we got to compile all of that into one decision rendered by me. I love the point that David Harbour's suddenly really good at escaping Russian prison. So congrats to you, Hopper, as for your character in Black Widow as well. Oh man, this is tough because season 2, I feel like season 2 had such a challenge in front of it because it had to follow this incredible surprise hit that we all loved from season 1. And then season 2, some fans might have thought it was a little bit of a letdown or the story got a little wonky, but Andres makes a lot of great points as far as the characters themselves coming into their own. But then you see season 4 and you see all of the toys that they had to play with. You mentioned the budgetary concerns. The sandbox gets a little bigger. We have more characters to sort of pull from and to tug on our heartstrings with, including Max, including an Eddie. And so in the sudden death round, I do have to side slightly. Personal preference aside, I got to go with Robert Butler III here with season 4. It may be recency bias for both of us, Robert, and you know that as well as I do. But as of right now, I'll go back and watch season 2. For you, Andres, I'm going to go back and watch season 2. So I reserve the right to change my mind well after this episode is aired. And maybe when we get episode or season 5, it's going to blow everything else out of the water. That's certainly a hope for a lot of Stranger Things fans. Well, Robert Butler is your champion here today, but this might be the best played match I've ever seen here on Binge Battle. And you could not ask for 2 better competitors, for 2 better people to be arguing pros and cons of Stranger Things than starting with our winner, Robert Butler III. Where can all the kids out there find you? Is there a chance that we get to see your hit movie, the short film Timestamp, out there sooner rather than later?
Yeah, it will be out there very soon on Amazon Prime Video. So make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Director RB3 for all the details.
Alrighty, and Andres Cabrera, you didn't even come up short today. We just basically ran out of time. We could have done this for 10 more rounds, I feel like. Where can everybody check you out? And I also want to give a shout out to the First Cut, y'all's channel, because in prep for this, did watch y'all Stranger Things 4 take, and it really was enlightening. If you're a Stranger Things fan out there, you've got to go subscribe to the First Cut right now and check out that review. It was really, really well done. Where can everybody else find all the good stuff you're working on?
Yeah, obviously, as you mentioned before, First Cut, we have our Stranger Things spoiler review for season 4, part 1 and 2 up right now. We also have our Thor, Love and Thunder with RB3 and Sabrina up as well. Review there. We're going to be dropping more reviews there as well. You can find me at Squad Leader Ace on Twitter and Instagram. So yeah, check that out.
All right, a lot of good streaming shows you all cover, obviously a lot of big time and some movies that are off the beaten path. So keep up the great work on the First Cut. Subscribe there on YouTube. As for us here at Rotten Tomatoes, just go to RottenTomatoes.com for all the latest in the world of movies, television, and everything in between, including possibly updates as to when we can expect a new Stranger Things season to drop. As for us here, for our esteemed engineer, Christian Rubalcaba, for Molly the Wonder Dog, who is snoring so loud, I can't believe it didn't get picked up in this here mic. I am merely Mark Ellis. You can find me at Mark Ellis Live. Upcoming comedy tour dates, markellis.live. Thanks for tuning in to Binge Battle, and we'll see y'all next time right here at Rotten Tomatoes.